Hi, this is Younus, and today we are on the podcast for accessibility testers. Today we have with us Hiral Bhatt. Hiral is a skilled professional, who has who is well versed in the space of digital accessibility and user experience. With over a decade of experience as a journalist and a marketer, Hiral is an astute designer with love for accessibility. With a CPAC and deep understanding of accessibility principles, Hiral is committed to ensuring digital content is inclusive and user-friendly for all individuals, regardless of their abilities. At Accessibility Testers today, she's going to share with us her experiences and we are going to understand how she contributes towards digital accessibility. We are thankful to you and we are grateful for this session, Hiral, and we are deeply grateful for this time. Dhara will, take it from here.
Hi, Hira. First of all, let me thank you for your time and consideration for this. And let us start with our questions here. And this is the first one for you. So, Hira, tell us about your experience in accessibility testing that you can share with us and audience.
Okay, hi guys. Thank you first of all for having me on board. Accessibility testing, I have been doing this for the last 8 months, and currently I've been testing websites and web-based chat forums and media players. Mobile has not exactly come up at this point because it's a slower process. So my entire focus has been on making sure the web part for my company is accessible, including our websites. Um, and yeah, been doing that for some time now.
Excellent. So, would you be able to tell us about the methodologies that, and tools that you use while performing your accessibility testing on web?
Yeah, I actually use the plugins like the Axe tool and Wave to kind of get an
Mhm.
initial head start. It allows me to share, I'm not a coder, so it allows me to share, really pinpoint the issues with my developers, and it gives them a head start as well, because they're not into accessibility at all. So it gives us a middle ground to talk about it. And I use the plugin called Visual Aria to also
Mhm.
understand the code a little bit better. And obviously, we do a lot of manual testing using VoiceOver, using NVDA and keyboard, and bid it against the WCAG double A compliance for now to make sure it's hitting all those points. And I use the checklist by DQ University, to make sure our
Mhm.
content side is accessible as well.
What's your favorite tool?
Honestly, the voiceover. It just helps me. It's just pretty straightforward. I like Axe a lot because again,
Mhm.
it lets me look at the code. Wave, um, it gives you the why, but it doesn't really help you understand the code. But Axe and definitely testing over voiceover really solves most of my problems.
We can agree with that. Yes, yes. Uh, can you also share an example of any challenging situation in your project that you have faced and then overcame?
In fact, I'm working with a very challenging problem right now, which we are struggling to find a solution to. We have a platform which is based off of another third-party live chat feature. And whatever was coded from our end, we're definitely able to make that accessible. But whatever was built from the chat platform, that has been very difficult to make it compliant to WCAG. And to find alternatives in the market, that have their APIs out that we can build our softwares on or our websites on, and having them accessible is
Mhm.
very hard. Um, they don't allow you to customize as such. Of course, if we were building our custom solution, it was easy, but then we are also on a time constraint, on a budget constraint. So my company is finding it very difficult to find a little turnaround at that time, because not everybody is on board with the whole accessibility feature. So even simple UI changes, like even changing the contrast, is
Mhm.
Mhm.
impossible if you're using a third party tool. So that has been a struggle for us.
Yeah,
I
yeah, that is pretty understandable. Yes. And here, how do you stay updated with the latest accessibility standards and guidelines? Is there any um, um, area? I mean, are you following any website? What do you do to stay updated?
I am an IAP member, so
Mhm.
going through their forums, going through their LinkedIn page, that has been extremely helpful. I would say my LinkedIn feed now is um, one of my largest source of learning. People who work in companies like Google or people who are accessibility specialists on
Mhm.
LinkedIn itself are working there. I think they're one of my greatest source of information as well as little helpful hints. Everybody working with IAP is also pretty proactive when it comes to sharing
Yes.
information.
Yes, because things keep changing rapidly in this
Yes.
world. So yes, it is necessary to stay updated, and this is a great source
Yeah.
to get the latest and most updated news about it. Thank you
Right.
for sharing that. And can you share a success story where your accessibility testing efforts had a significant impact on the user experience?
Sure. We have, I think one of my favorite projects has been the media player that my company built, which used to be in general very chaotic. Like you landed there, there was just an information overload. There wasn't exactly UX consideration. It was just a feature infused player. And while we were trying to, clean it up or fix it for accessibility, the whole experience started getting even more straightforward and seamless for even other users. So then while just trying to fix accessibility points, we actually made sure that it was much more usable, much more clean, much more intuitive
Mhm.
compared to you needed to have a little hand holding on how to use that product. So that's something I'm pretty proud of.
And then you perform frequent UATs to make sure that what changes you have made on the site is
Yes.
working in the favor of special needs.
Absolutely. We have not been able to really go down and test it with users of various abilities because I don't think we're there yet. We want to make sure it's completely compliant first
Mhm.
before we actually give it out there to the users to play around with it.
Got
Yeah.
it. Got it. That's interesting. With the advent of so many media players, so many websites, adding layers of accessibility to it definitely adds a lot of value, and it makes it easier for people to absorb or utilize the resources that the company is offering. Yep, I
Okay.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. And let's talk about a little bit of the roadmap within the organizations, because our
Mhm.
audience would also like to know that, what strategies do you use to collaborate with designers and developers to address accessibility issues effectively? And if you can also share at what phase you would start involving yourself in uh, that process.
Um, with my designers and developers, while always I would, the day I joined my company, a lot of stuff was already developed. I wish I would have gotten in sooner while they were still designing and defining this. But a lot of it was already developed, and before the company moved towards making this accessible.
Yeah.
Um, but what I started doing was there was a lot of hesitation at first, saying, "Why are we doing this?" Or, "No, we just have it that way. Why not just go with it? Why
Yeah.
are we changing so much and things are breaking?" Um, so what I actually started doing with I had weekly sessions with almost every department in the company, an
Mhm.
Mhm.
accessibility 101, taking them through the whys. Like, why are we doing this? Who is it really impacting? Which are your top
Exactly.
3 or 4
Yeah.
personas that you have to
Yeah.
target? I started doing voice, like they understood nobody wanted to use NVDA on their end,
Yeah.
or nobody wanted to use voiceover. So I would actually use voiceover, record it through my phone and share it with the guys. So they got to have a first-hand experience of what a voiceover sounds like. And that
Mhm.
Yeah.
was, I think now at this point, even a new feature that gets developed, the development team is so on board and so proactive that they understand. They completely just think about scenarios in their head, like, how are we going to do this now? How is a blind person going to understand this? Or how is somebody who's deaf going to understand this? And
Yes.
that's what I realized, that even though they don't
Yeah.
understand the
Yeah.
mechanics,
Yeah.
Yes.
they've really got the why seated in their head.
Yeah.
ab-
So, yeah. So, like, we are also seeing this happening most of the time, like, with most of the organizations that, like, once it starts with a question, what is accessibility testing, and then why you would want to implement it, and then when we should be like involving that in our process, and then how we can implement it, and then who should be involved. So yeah, thanks for like sharing that. This is pretty useful for any organization who is planning on a roadmap towards accessibility testing.
Absolutely. I think it's great if everybody can get involved, not just the designers. We had meetings
Right.
with the content team, the marketing team.
Mhm.
I mean, I know we had some boring sessions where I took them through laws as well. I'm like, let's just
Yeah,
understand the laws a little bit more deeper. But I think that just helped cement it in their head of why are we doing
absolutely.
this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that builds a culture of accessibility in the organization.
Yeah.
Once that is weaved into the DNA of the organization, it makes it more viable and more economic than pushing it after. So
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
entire economics of building a software, accessibility has to be weaved right in the beginning and right in uh, the mindset of the entire team. It has to be a whole team approach rather than someone pushing it from top down. So
Yeah.
that's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is just not the nice thing to do, but it is the right thing to do and at the right time. So yes, I agree. I can't deny that. And so let's move towards our next question. How do you test for accessibility in different platforms and devices like mobile apps or responsive web design? And I believe that you focus more on the web design and not on the mobile apps. Is that right,
Yes,
Hero?
as of now, yes, definitely. My main focus is on websites. We are a smaller organization, so moving to mobile yet is going to take time. And
Yeah.
web is primarily what our clients use. So yeah, that has been my main focus.
So
The
like
landscape.
well, sorry, Eunice,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, so the landscape on the web is also huge. I think
Yes.
there's a lot of scope and there's a lot of requirement on the web space, to be accessible. So I think there's a lot that we can talk about here
Yeah.
only. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So here, like, and here is one more question related to web design accessibility testing.
Mhm.
Let's, for example, uh, it is a different scenario when you are revamping the entire website. Then you would start accessibility testing right from the first phase where developers have started coding and wireframe is in hand. But what would you do and prefer to do on, like, let's say you are just making some enhancement changes on the existing website,
Mhm.
where like if you try to improve website from accessibility point of view, it will take a huge amount of time and effort. Then what would be your opinion to deal with that?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. In fact, I'm facing that right now. We're making a web-based analytical portal, and we've been involved accessibility from the start. And it is so much easier to just go ahead and make
Yes.
those changes, and there's no code breakage, or there is no even the time turnaround is fast. And then on a website, um, I mean, I think the developers who need to push the changes, and when you're trying to do that, one thing breaks. The developers would know this more, that when you're trying to fix one thing and you
Mhm.
try to push that change, something else breaks in between. And something even very simple like changing information on a footer or how it's displayed is so much more time consuming
Right.
than the accessibility efforts taken, on the design phase or even the planning phase. So that's something I gotta, in my company, I gotta test that firsthand. That again, people, I think I commonly struggle this with everybody, where people think accessibility, the job is like an overlay, like you're done and then you just kind of do a final tweak, and that's not the case. It's got to be built in from the start, from the planning phase. And it's been hard for me to make people understand that accessibility doesn't just mean for people who are disabled, but we are trying to make it easy to use for everybody. Yeah,
Absolutely.
and it has been difficult. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's true. It's true. Yeah. I think um, it's more of realization. That is something that needs to be educated to people, and that's how we can advocate about accessibility, and that's how we can reach out to more people. This is where accessibility testers as a community comes into picture, where we are trying to do the same, you know, across organizations through platforms like LinkedIn and Twitter, now X. That's what we are doing. Yeah.
Yeah. And can you also provide us some examples of assistive technologies, screen readers you have experience with, and how you would incorporate them in your testing?
So I primarily do use the voiceover. I don't work with Windows much, so my testing really just involves using voiceover. And um, yeah, I kind of switch off my screen and try to accomplish tasks. I try to just use the audio version of it. And that has been it. It also does get a little confusing. Like, is the problem with the website or is it with the voiceover technology? So I wish there was more literature on the versions coming out, or what issues are they facing, or what issues is pinpointed
Yeah.
towards voiceover rather than actually on the code.
And at what phase of testing you would introduce that? Once everything is done, or still in the process, or towards the last phase of testing? How does that work?
If it was up to me, I would definitely want to do it from the start, from the get-go. But unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way in the real world,
Yeah,
especially with small to middle-sized organizations. And it does happen towards the end. And then there is the cleanup crew who's
yes.
constantly doing all of that.
Exactly, because sometimes you will see that resistance coming from other team members that, like, wait till everything is done and ready,
Yeah,
and then you can start testing on assistive tools. So, yes,
absolutely. I mean, I find the issue with something as simple as iframes. It's a very big
yeah,
resistance because everything, um, something that was built 3, 4 years ago is pretty much on iframe, and then they are hard. Then you can't go and change the code completely, or you to change how
right,
the stuff was built.
Much
And then
control.
it's like, yeah, and then it's like, okay, we can't fix this. Why? Because it was built on an iframe, and we can't. And I'm like, okay, then it's not accessible.
right.
Um, so I wish I knew a little bit more about how these things were programmed, but I'm not a programmer. But I do hear this coming out a lot, that we can't fix this because it was built in iframe. We can't go back and change the technology our product was based on.
Absolutely.
Whether it was,
That's
built
so
on a
true.
third-party API, or whether it was built on an iframe or something.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Interesting. So I have a small question,
Yeah.
given the age that we live in today, what is your take on AI and how is it going to help in accessibility, or what kind of tools can we use that can, make life easier in this space?
Um, I I don't have much opinion about AI. I can honestly, I use it more for content.
Uh-huh.
And I definitely be it's a great assistant. It is great. It's something, or I wish I can use it more as a tool to brainstorm with,
Yep.
rather than a tool that's going to be of a replacement or something you can 100% rely on.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
you do need, I think, especially with all of us working independently, this could be that actually one partner that we actually need to perform our job, or to make sure we streamline it a little bit more. We can definitely, I've been reading about AI tools that solve accessibility problems, but again, nothing beats manual testing, nothing beats a user's real experience. So I think by the
I
time
Yeah.
we
completely agree with that.
actually come to a point where an AI can completely mimic, and we're all so differently abled that it's not about just crossing off personas, or somebody's blind or deaf, or has a learning disability. Even the learning disability is so complex that I
Mhm.
don't think something like AI is right now at least not sophisticated enough to pinpoint what those issues are. There are
Ab-
cultural barriers, even in something like content. I see there's so many cultural barriers, or there's so many
Yep.
understanding
There are
barriers that,
biases. Yeah, there are a lot of biases
yeah,
involved.
it's very hard to build that persona and then teach it with the AI. It's still going to be much more up to the user, whether they like your stuff, they can use your stuff, period.
Absolutely. I think that is
Yeah.
brilliantly handled, or answered, so to say. Hiral, appreciate that.
Thank you.
And like, just a small related question to that. So, Many organization also, along with manual testing, they use some kind of automation tool for testing.
Mhm.
So is it possible to train those automation tools in terms of including accessibility testing as a part of regular testing?
Um, yeah, I mean, it'll be good so that you again get a head start. But I even any testing does only catch only 50% of the issues. No matter
Mhm.
how
Right.
sophisticated a testing tool is, they don't catch 100% of the issues.
Mhm.
Even
Yeah.
though I use Axe for accessibility, I can visibly see errors on the site, which Axe doesn't catch or which Wave is not going to catch. So again, it gives you a head start. It gives you what inner mechanics are not working, but yet on the overall part, it doesn't really help. You need both. You need both. You
You need
need,
yeah,
yeah, a good
Absolutely.
tool as well as you need humans who have an understanding of how this should function.
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah, I agree to that because what the automated tools mostly do is, understanding of the code behind, and it's more built on a checklist rather than an experiential,
Right.
development. So, of course, they are
Absolutely.
improving each passing day. It's not that the tools are not improving, but experience is something totally different, and that can only be felt and not measured against a checklist. So that's true. I agree to that.
And just one of the scenarios, let's say that you worked on any website for accessibility testing 6 months back, and
Yeah.
you found few new updates on the guidelines, on the standards, and then you want to incorporate those changes in that website. Would you rather wait for few more months and get more updates, or you would want to do it right away?
I definitely want to alert the teams right away, and I would leave it up to the developers as well, or people who are working in our CTOs on how they want to proceed with this. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to break something that's already working, and yet kind of give them a head
Absolutely.
start because they're also working on different versions of their product. So I want to make sure they know what to expect. When I started reading up about now what new changes WCAG is going to do, I started telling my team about it as well. That okay,
Mhm.
this is what's expected. Don't go by just what WCAG 2.0 A
Mhm.
compliance used to be. Just expect that this is me. This is also what's going to come up. And I think slowly we started moving away from just compliance and just started using logic. That would this make
Mhm.
sense? Would this
Right.
flow make sense? And
Mhm.
what I can see is I don't even think half the time these guys even check compliance. They just by default know, like, okay, is this going to be something that somebody who can't see or is having a blurry vision, will they be able
Yeah.
to even understand what we're saying? And that's beautiful that they're not just sticking to the compliance, but they're actually going by a very
Right.
logic driven approach.
Yeah.
And like there will be, of course, a decision making part from the upper management, and time, money, and efforts also involved in the process.
Yep.
So I would assume that we will have to consider and balance all the factors before moving ahead, right?
True. So that does come. I mean, sometimes there is a lot of issues that we want to change something because there's no work around it. And it's like, no, this was a management decision and the flow makes sense. And this is true with any company. I think not
Yes,
just accessibility, but if no matter where you work or what you do, it's kind of an issue there.
Yep.
absolutely. Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
So,
Have you ever worked on any international project considering accessibility for multiple languages or cultural context?
I've mostly stuck to worked with US clients and worried about the ADA compliance. But what I do also do, like we have multilingual captions on our media player, and that's something that does help us work with people from various cultures to make it understand whether it's grammatically correct, whether it's represented correctly, and yeah, so it's a start. But definitely, I work within the boundaries of people with ADA and working with Section 508 right now.
Have you ever faced a situation, for example, US has different guidelines, Canada must be
Hmm.
having different guidelines for a particular thing, or let's say
Yeah.
India must be having different perspective about that same thing, and your website is global and you
Hmm.
have clients and users in multiple locations of the world. So how do you deal with that situation?
As I said, I don't actually deal with a lot of international clients or audience. My
Mhm.
real focus is dealing with people in the US. Most of my clients or the people even using our product, they
Mhm.
are within the US. So thankfully, I've not been able to really branch out
Uh-huh.
and understand, how
Yeah.
multi-countries, even websites for that matter. I haven't really worked with multiple countries' websites.
Okay.
But I'd love to someday. That would be my next step to work with people to make one product
Yeah.
workable everywhere.
Yeah,
But
because somebody would wonder that, like, the legal requirements would be different for each country. And, like,
true.
when are dealing with that, like, of course, you must educate yourself first, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Thankfully, my CPAC allows me to do that because
yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I didn't
yeah,
do
yeah, yeah.
WAS yet. I went back and I first started with CPAC because it kind of gave me a very global outlook on accessibility.
Yeah.
Um, which has now caused a problem because now I look at even the built environments and I start thinking about accessibility, not just the web part.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it does give you an insight. So I know if that an opportunity ever came where I was actually working with people of different countries,
Right.
it would be easier to know where to start from. That's why I do encourage that even though you're just into web accessibility, doing a CPAC would help,
Yes.
so that you don't face this problem when you actually run into it.
Yep. Absolutely.
That's a wonderful suggestion, definitely. Um, so, like, yeah, one more thing here. How do you conduct usability testing with individuals with disabilities to gather feedback on accessibility improvements?
As I said, right now I have not directly worked with people or got them to use our products because first we're making sure it's working for us
Hmm.
internally before we really branch out and start getting users to actually come and test it. But it is on the in the pipeline that once we've hit all our compliances or once we've been able to get our products to a point that they're usable, at least from our point of view, we do plan to test it out to people of various abilities.
Yeah.
Got it. Wow. Uh, that's it.
Okay. And what are your thoughts on how everyone can contribute towards digital accessibility? Not only your organization, but this would be a general question for, like, let's say right from LinkedIn community to your network to your colleagues and whoever can bring the change.
I think one of the roadblocks I do see everybody within the accessibility community just talking to each other rather than this finding a way of how to reach a broader audience. Those people who may not be into
Yeah.
accessibility at all, or that's not their specialty. And that's something I've noticed from the get-go, that unless I happen to get into accessibility because of a course that I did on LinkedIn for UX, and I got to
Mhm.
know about it, and that kind of I went down that rabbit hole, and one thing after the other, and I finished my CPAP. But what I do see is we really need to start conversations not among each other, but people who are writers, who are UX designers, who are UI designers, and we need to simplify it. We
Yeah.
all speak a language that we'll understand, but somehow we need to speak in their language, making them understand,
Yes.
probably giving checklists, which is not so technical, that they help understand what they need to do.
Absolutely.
And
I think that,
more than the development team, I think designers and project
Mhm.
managers, stakeholders, they are the people who need to be approached first.
yeah.
Yeah.
From the get-go, that's where it is. If the designers and the stakeholders are in line with the needs and they understand the requirement for this, definitely it gives a boost. So we were in talks with Accessible the other day, and they said that roughly 20%, they've experienced 20% hike in e-commerce sales. If you have an e-commerce portal, if you
Mhm.
just make it accessible. So
Okay.
definitely from a business point of view, also it makes a lot of sense because 1 out of 5 people are using these features and are making use of your portals, in a much more easier way than otherwise they would have to work around, or it makes their life difficult, so they eventually drop off. So I think that helps in improving your drop rates, and I think it is
True.
something that can be discussed and prioritized right from the get-go?
I have met clients. I'm not talking
Ah,
my current job in general, in last past year or so, I have been meeting clients, and whenever we do talk about designing stuff for them and begin talking about accessibility, they, I
mhm.
think, do not understand the magnitude of people who will benefit if things are made
Absolutely.
accessible. They think it's a one-off. That
Yeah,
okay, there is this person, one-off person might come to our site or come use order stuff from our site, and we can't spend XYZ amount for one person compared to the
right.
million other people are coming. And I think they just don't understand that. So the statistics that we get to learn within this community, that's something that they don't have, or they're not
Yeah,
even understanding how much business they're losing, or they still look at it as a charity um model rather than actually something that's a business model. That no, you're
uh,
going to get help, you're going to get more money, or
Mhm.
but I don't think they understand that part.
yeah. It comes the hard way. That's how it is. Unless
Yes.
once they realize the losses, it's when they jump in. The losses could come from drop off of the users who are coming to the website, or the law. If the law comes to your door, you don't have a choice. That's how it.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
then the laws, unfortunately, even in the United States, are so focused towards government rather
yeah,
than the private sector. So people aren't afraid yet. And
yeah, yeah,
they're not. They're just like, okay, if unless you're working for a government client, why would we care about being accessible? And that's been something I'm telling you, I've spoken to people of very large organizations who have been very cold about their approach towards accessibility, saying they don't want to spend that effort,
True.
or because they're not a government entity. And that's what surprises me the most. Yeah.
and that's where larger organizations or these super top 5 and top 10, they face so many lawsuits every single month, and
Yeah.
it's yet, and they have a way around it. That's the fun part. uh,
Yeah.
People are busy finding ways around the law, rather than if they, even if they don't worry about the law, if they just make the products accessible, it'll be so much more easier. And I think that makes so much sense, you know
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's what if we not even use the word accessible, but what I loved about from learning from CPAC was the word universal design. And that's
Absolutely.
something I hold very dearly from my entire CPAC experience. I don't really talk about accessible design. Like I don't say that our product is accessible at work. We're like,
Yeah.
are we designing for everyone, or are we designing, or are we making this feature work for everyone? And they ask who everyone, then I start getting into personas. But then this divide between, let's have personas that are accessible, or let's have this one button that's got the accessibility overlay, and that kind of is become my new pet peeve. I'm like, no, why are we just not calling it universal design? Or we've, made sure we're designing
Yeah.
for everybody with every combination of ability or disability that they may have.
I love this point of view, Hiral, and I would really love if you can take a small webinar for our users. That'll be really useful for them, and they'll be able to learn about personas and how can we embed, universal design while building, any UX. So I think this is your core area, and I think that can come out well if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. I love talking about it. You might know I love blabbering about that a lot because it's personally very important now, more than just, yeah, it has nothing to do with compliance, but that's something that has struck or stayed with me through my whole CPAC experience.
I think uh, I think we have bombarded you with a lot of questions today. I think it's time now. I don't know how much time are we on right now, but I think this is something, if we can schedule somewhere, maybe a week down the line or the next week, whenever your schedule allows you, in the next 15
Absolutely.
days. Yeah, you let us know. Maybe I'll send you some slots and you can pick up one, and from there we can continue. And if you yeah, and we can definitely plan to invite more people on the call, and maybe they'll learn from it.
Okay, that'll be great.
I'll look out for designers and UX guys who can, definitely benefit from this. I can go out, speak to a few people and get in. Right?
Okay, definitely. That sounds awesome. And even I can
Mm.
probably spread the word in my network as well. And yeah, we'd love to have a nice even brainstorm. I would love to hear what everybody else has to say as well. Like
Yeah.
to have different opinions on how do we fix this, or how do we go about it. Love to have that.
Absolutely.
Yes. Hiral, I think that we have learned a lot today from you. And thank you for
Thank you.
sharing all your experiences, your knowledge, the blogs. The one last thing I would like to ask is like, I
Yeah.
know you like to follow LinkedIn
Yeah.
and also you suggested for CPAC exam.
Yeah.
What other suggestions do you have today for
Uh,
us and
if for
audience?
somebody to learn accessibility,
Mm-hmm.
I honestly, it's nowhere beyond IAP and my LinkedIn community for it, because I wouldn't say the blogs are there yet, and I'm not much of a reader. I'm not somebody who can spend time reading long form blogs. So I definitely say start small. If somebody wants to even learn accessibility, there are enough of small little courses. Like what changed me was a 1 hour course on LinkedIn that just spoke about the 7 types of visual impairments
Yeah.
and how to
Mm-hmm.
design for them. And that was it. I remember feeling very passionately the next morning saying, why aren't we fixing this? And that's just changed how I look at web design. So this was a journey 2 years ago. So if
Hmm.
somebody really wants to learn, I'm like, you don't even have to do a CPAC. Just be a part of these communities. Start seeing what even people outside the websites are doing. Like for example, the recent news of how United Airlines is
Yeah.
including brails on their seats and stuff like that. Even if you'll see that it's everywhere, it's not just restricted to digital accessibility. It's starting everywhere, and that would help.
Yeah, the little amount of awareness that it brings, and
Yeah,
once you are aware about it, I see. So it's not just limited to digital, it's phygital, it's physical as well. So once you
absolutely.
start, once you're once you're activated, once you are activated on this topic, I think the universal design applies everywhere, right from staircases to
Oh,
buses to
yes,
trains to aeroplanes, everything. So I think, yeah, it's a universal thing, so to say. I think that is it.
absolutely.
Be accepted first, understood, and then spread. That's how it is.
It's everywhere. I mean, even in my the community I stay in, I actually walk around it. I take the stairs, and I'm like, okay, how is somebody who's on a wheelchair, how are they going to use it if there's a fire alarm? Or how come the fire alarms are not that bright? And I start looking at flaws everywhere that if I had this, and that's what it starts becoming a very logic-driven approach, right? Rather than a compliance-driven approach, that you start
Mm-hmm.
thinking, okay, if I couldn't see, if I couldn't walk, if I couldn't ask for help, what am I going to do in such a situation if a fire breaks out? And just in the basic community that I'm living in.
Absolutely.
So imagine just going out there in the world and trying to find all of these issues there. Putting yourself in those situations would really help you understand the pain points.
True.
It is. It is true. It is
Yeah.
true.
Well, thank you guys. It was wonderful talking to you, and
Yeah.
I hope to catch you guys next time. We'll
Absolutely. Thank
stay
you
in
so much,
touch through
Hiral.
email.
We really
Thank you.
appreciate the time that you have spent with us.
No, and thank
And
you for inviting me to this podcast. I had actually no idea this was going to be a podcast. I thought we were all just going to three talk about it. But I was like, okay, this is a podcast. I had no idea. But
yeah,
all right, that's wonderful.
No,
thank you.
since you have
Maybe
so
next
much
time.
knowledge and you are willing to share with other people too, so that is a very good thing from your side too. And I know for sure many people will benefit from this
Yeah,
interview.
hope so. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Have a great
Thank you
day.
so much.
Bye.